I try to walk, realize, emergency needs to be called. My husband calls emergency. This really cute guy named Tim comes down from a helicopter on a wire like Tom Cruise. And he says, we're going to go up on this cable, and I'm going to kind of be behind you, sort of like cradling you. And here, I'm going to put this harness on you. And I'm looking at my son-in-law, and I'm like, you better take pictures. I don't know if I can help, And so I just quickly went, wait a minute, you teach coping skills. You do diaphragmatic breathing through your nose. So I just started doing, your day has changed. You are now doing something different. Let's pay attention to the present moment. This guy, Tim, seems pretty confident, like he can do this safely. So just listen to him very carefully. And so then as we get off, the ground, I'm on, and of course we walk up this mountain to get the view. Well, I've got the best view of the whole town, and I thought I better just enjoy this. I'm hanging there from a cable. This is an adventure, so I changed my idea. If you had asked me, do you want to dangle from a helicopter on a cable? I would have said, are you crazy? But I ended up adapting.
Hello and welcome to the Disrupt the Everyday podcast. We're here to help you navigate life while disrupting the status quo. Our discussions cover a number of topics relevant to everyday life. We discuss everything from relationships to entrepreneurship. We also engage in some difficult but important conversations. And now, here are your hosts, Brian and Tanya Hamilton.
Welcome to another episode of the Disrupt the Everyday podcast. Today we're joined by Dr. Gina Simmons Schneider, and we'll be talking about coping skills and some of the topics from her new book. Gina, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Awesome. No, we're glad to have you on. And we want to take an opportunity to get to know you a little bit. So we're going to start off by asking, who is Gina Simmons Schneider?
The big question. When you've lived as long as I have, there's a lot to say, but I think what I'll start with is what might be most interesting to people is my current role is I'm a psychotherapist and co-director of Schneider Counseling and Corporate Solutions. So what we do is we work with individuals and couples and executives and workers and workplaces, helping people manage conflicts and also very difficult emotions that they might be going through, such as anxiety, shame, anger, grief, those sorts of emotional states that can really disrupt our lives and disable us. And I had a kind of a long trajectory in getting here. I started out working with incarcerated youth. I worked in residential treatment with pedophile offenders, juvenile pedophiles, doing residential treatment with them, and then went from there working for the probation department as an assistant deputy probation officer, working with incarcerated youth and helping them, supervising them. And then I also did training programs for kids to help them transition out of that. And then we got into prevention. So we developed this awesome program where we worked in conjunction with the police department with first-time juvenile offenders to try to break the high recidivism rate that they had. They had reoffending rates at about 65% in the first year. So we wanted to try to bring that number down. We thought if we worked with families, we were a counseling center, and so we worked with the families and the kids to put them on a different path so they wouldn't reoffend. And we were able to lower the recidivism rate from 65% down to 5%, which was really exciting. So we did that for a while, and then I went into private practice. And in my private practice, I was just doing mixed bag of marriage, family counseling, working with depression, anxiety, the normal things that people go through. But then I also got a certification in critical incident stress debriefing. So after workplace shootings, homicides, suicides. We would go out and we would help people debrief from these horrific experiences. And I did that for a while. And then my husband and I, who's also my partner, we wanted to do more on the prevention side. You really get tired of trying to help clean up a disastrous mess. And it's better to kind of be able to prevent some of these things from happening. So working in workplaces, there are many things they can do to prevent and spot somebody who's troublesome and, prevent some of these things from escalating. And also with couples, those kinds of things can escalate. So we started this anger management program where we actually teach people skills on how to manage their anger and difficult emotions, and then started doing conflict management trainings. And then also I did a youth program as well for a while. So now we're mostly doing corporate training and our private practice, and then some consulting. And we do consult with people all over the world, business owners and individuals who want coaching on how do I handle this really difficult person in my team, or how do I handle these people who are, different cultural issues and, all kinds of stuff that comes up. So it's been a long road, but that's where I am.
All right. So yeah, it sounds like, you have a little bit of experience, I guess, is what I'm taking from all that.
Yeah. You're already bored.
No, that's quite the background though. Like there's a few things that stuck out, but I guess, you talk about prevention and, the old adage, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. It, applies to so many situations. But I want to kind of circle back to the beginning of your experience there, where you mentioned working with pedophiles, like juvenile pedophiles.
Mm-hmm.
Was there, and I'm just kind of speaking from my own experience as well, just working in healthcare facilities and interacting with people of all walks of life.
Mm-hmm.
Were there any common themes that you saw? Was trauma something that was a big part of all of their experiences?
You nailed it. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Every single one. I mean, one of the boys was 14 years old being raped by his stepfather. And he literally walked into the police department and said, I'm being raped, and he had been molesting little kids, but violently. I mean, he needed surgery. I mean, he was really, really incredibly injured. I had so much compassion for a lot of these kids, because what they have seen and lived through is something that no one should ever have to see and live through. And he had the courage to walk himself into a police department, and, they evaluated him, and they obviously had to take him from his home, and then they put him in our residential treatment center. And I saw kids who, a 15-year-old kid came in whose dad was a drug dealer, had a mansion, a Rolls Royce, weapons, bought his son prostitutes. This kid was growing up a criminal, raised to be a criminal, and his parents get arrested. Now he's an orphan. Basically, his parents are serving, 15 years in prison. And he comes in like a wild animal, like he's Mr. Gangster, gonna dominate the place. And within 6 months, he was the sweetest kid in the program. But he had to be, we had a place called Special Care where if he was starting to get violent, he was threatening me at one point, and push a little buzzer and 4 big guys come and take him to the padded room, and he can work himself out in the padded room. Mm-hmm. And then he came back into the unit. And the way they ran this particular facility was really like a boarding school. So the kids had communal meals, they had their own rooms, they had a recreation center, they had a school on campus, and most of them stayed there at least a year. So they really had you could see how much environment, you take somebody out of one environment, you put them in a different environment, they're a completely different person. And so it really taught me a lot about how much environment, I mean, certainly there are hereditary issues that can play a role. Certainly kids can have neurological deficits and, things like autism and other types of brain injury types of conditions that some of those also occurred in utero, where they had a parent that was abusing substances and the child comes out with brain damage. So you can really start to have some compassion for these wounded people, and the whole idea that hurt people are the ones who hurt people. We need to obviously keep society safe from their criminal behavior. But a lot of times you can turn things around by putting people on a different path. Some people will need to be institutionalized for life. I mean, that's just going to be their destiny. But some of these kids, I saw them just turn around and, make a life for themselves and stop doing that behavior. But I can't find or think of a single child I worked with that didn't have pretty extreme trauma. So you nailed it.
I assume that'd have to be coming from a pretty dark place, especially for someone so young.
Yeah, really young.
Now you mentioned that, the special care, was that kind of, I guess, an alternative for coping skills until these individuals were able to do therapy and kind of learn how to deal with what they were feeling?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and they called it special care to really show that we care about you, but you cannot behave in a violent way in society. So you can be violent, but you're in a padded room where you can't hurt yourself. You can, thrash about and scream and curse, and it's and once you've worked that out of your system, then somebody will talk to you, a counselor will talk to you and help you through the feelings, and that sort of thing. So some kids really are, and I think, I tell parents, because I used to teach parenting classes too, and I tell parents, children are wild animals. They will be shocked at their child's behavior. And I'm like, no, that's what a wild animal does. It's our job to socialize them that, you do not throw your food at a restaurant. And, but that's what a monkey would do. The monkey would start throwing food, in a restaurant. So it's our job to socialize them. So some kids were raised in environments where there was no adult attention, and they'd have, days and days. I worked with a young foster child. She was about 15. I asked her what her happiest memory was. And she started telling me this story where she was 5 years old, and her 18-month-old and 3-year-old younger siblings were left alone in the trailer for a week. So she's 5 years old, scrounging food for her, and the toddler's still in diapers, and they wanted to, and the mom had gotten in a fight, drug addicts, and they left their kids for 5 days. And she wanted to please her mom. And so she decided, because they were fighting about housework and cleanliness. And so they mopped the floor, and they couldn't figure out why they got this stuff from under the sink, and they mopped the floor. And so that would be nice when their mom got home. And they couldn't understand why it was sticky, but, they wanted to impress their mom. And mom comes home, and they all had a huge laugh because she had mopped the floor with maple syrup and didn't know, because she's 5 years old. She couldn't read the bottle. And I was like, both heartbroken, that this is your happiest memory from childhood, And I think people don't realize that some children really grow up completely unloved. For those of us who love our children and we socialize with people who love and take care of their children, there are many who are abandoned, abused, neglected, and just, left. And they need our help. They need society needs to come around and go, hey, we'll give you a safe home. We'll provide you with counseling. We'll help you through this. And many of them get out of it if they're given that new environment. You put them in a new environment. And, for many years, my mother worked for a boarding school. It was a pioneer program in California. It was a boarding school for foster children so they could all be together, and they didn't have to deal with the social aspects of feeling like you're the freak because you don't have parents. And they were all in the same boat, so they had a football team, and they competed, and they won, and they had people that helped them transition to college and bought them all their bedding for college and drove them to college. And it's a really great program, but society has to invest in these kids, otherwise we have these problems, right? And many of them can be prevented if we just give them the tools.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting. It reminds me of my years working at Children's Aid, and just, the times where you would actually have to get to that point. The kids, I'll never forget the first time the children didn't really even cry or have that moment. I thought, you would be almost trying to pry these children away. And it's because that attachment had been broken so long ago. Right. And obviously, they were sad, please don't get me wrong, but you see that when those relationships aren't nurtured, when it's not healthy, when they're, that love isn't there, it definitely changes the child. Right. And then it's
exactly.
Like, if these kids don't learn, like you said, don't receive that from somebody else, whether it be like a kinship placement, foster, what have you, it's like, when are they going to learn? And then they get to, the potential people that you work with now. So if there hasn't been any work done along the way, it's like, how are you dealing with those coping skills now that you're in a relationship? Right. And when that anxiety arises and all that kind of stuff. So I look at this all as it being like a lifelong process for so many of us. Right. It's sometimes it's like, instead of that really stressful, life-changing situation waiting till then, it's almost like, let's just keep trying to chip at it as we go, so that those tools are there for when crisis does arise.
Right. And really I think what you're talking about too is trauma. And right, when a family is when the family has broken the trust, it's so fractured, and the children know they're not really being cared for or loved. There's still that yearning for attachment, and then, kids find varying ways to cope with that. But you're right, it is a lifelong healing. And we see it in the brain, with the new neuropsychology research, where we can look with functional magnetic resonance imaging, where we can see the brain in, functioning in real time. We see a thinning in the prefrontal cortex from those who have been emotionally abused, and changes in, which has to do with changes in their self-concept, difficulty in self-awareness. And then also other changes in the brain that make us, anyone suffering that kind of relational trauma, we are then more prone to depression and anxiety, right? Which has its own neurological consequences and physiological consequences. So a lot of the coping skills that I teach people, because I think any one of us, most of us are going to have traumatic experiences in our life. Some have multiple ones before they're even 5. And some of us, get to live a long time before we have some scary things happen to us. But I think coping with, relational losses, people we love die, people betray us, we suffer, right? So all of those things can leave us with some sort of trauma. But I love Dr. Julie Smith. She's a psychologist in the UK, and she did this image of trauma as, like, we think of it as this big black, thing inside of us. And then she basically said, but you have a new experience. And she takes a paintbrush and puts a bright color around that. And then you have another experience, and she puts another bright color around that. And then you have another experience. And at the end, she has this beautiful rainbow kind of picture with this, black thing inside. But that is kind of how the brain heals from trauma. We can't heal from just talk therapy or trying to think happy thoughts. And, we need experience, because experience is what calms down the amygdala, our threat sensing part of our brain that can be, for kids who are physically abused, it can be enlarged, so that makes them have a really exaggerated startle reaction and really extreme reactions to any kind of disturbance, sensory disturbance. So those kids, they need experiences of calm. They need to know how to calm their nervous system down. And adults, not just kids, but all of us need to have those calming strategies. So I always tell people, the best way to get through trauma is to aim towards a valued goal for your future and work towards that goal. And you'll have new experiences that will heal. I mean, personally, I grew up in poverty. So I grew up, I was an emancipated minor. My dad left. My mom was broke trying to support us. I had to go to work when I was 15 to try to, and who hires a 15-year-old that looks like she's 13? It was very, very scary and challenging for a while. But I had people that encouraged me to have goals, and I did have some love in my life, and so I was fortunate, that I was able to aim towards goals. And then those new experiences build confidence, and then your brain actually builds new maps over that old trauma map, and you can heal and recover. Your brain isn't going to let you ever forget, and that's good, because we need that for survival, right?
Mm-hmm.
We don't want to forget where the saber-toothed tiger came out and ate grandma, We want to know that that's a dangerous spot, Don't ever go there. But I think we can learn also that there are safe people, right? Just because there are people who are unsafe and who will abuse us doesn't mean we should give up entirely on all humans, the whole human race or anything. So anyway, that's the key to inspiring people little by little to keep trying, keep aiming for a better future, because you can create a better future if you can imagine it and if you work towards it.
Yeah. And even just going back to what you said about, it's not only just like talk therapy specifically, right? Like when it comes to working on past trauma and all that, it's so true what you say. And just like, even from what I've experienced working with clients, is that it has to be a whole bunch of stuff. Really, it's just bringing this all into your life, right? Because one isn't going to be enough. You can, talk to the professionals all you want, but then it's like, how do you put that in action on the rest of your life when you're not sitting in that office, right? So I like that example of just like bringing those new memories, trying to make changes in your life to become better and, to do better as well.
Exactly. You're saying it so well, Tanya. I mean, I think that a lot of times we have anxiety around trauma, right? So we don't want to, we fear people. We don't want to get attached, or we don't want to get hurt. And it varies from person to person, whatever the trauma was or is. But a lot of the early stages of therapy are really helping people manage their nervous system arousal so that their anxiety level can go down a few notches, so they can take a risk. It's kind of like getting over the fear of public speaking. Everybody usually has a fear of public speaking. Pretty much everybody has one when they start out. Even Hams, the kid that wants to be the class clown, even has a fear of public speaking, because then you have to like remember your lines and you can't just be spontaneous. And so, we have a fear, that's an anxiety. So any kind of anxiety, we have to be able to manage our nervous system arousal in such a way that we're not going to go throw up, and that we're going to be able to not go white with panic, and even if we're nervous, be able to continue to function normally. So a lot of therapy is just teaching people skills and having them practice those skills so they can do the deep breathing, they can meditate a bit and lower their nervous system arousal. They can develop good habits of sleep and exercise, and giving themselves space to have their feelings, safe spaces to have their feelings. And all of that starts to bring their baseline level of anxiety lower. And because if your baseline level is up here, you don't have very far to go before you're losing it, So if you can bring your baseline level of, and we all have anxiety, we all have some baseline level. So if you can bring it way down, you can take more risks because it might get up here, but I can still handle that, and I know how to bring it back down. So I think that's a lot of the early work in therapy is preparing people to take risks. And then once they can set goals and start to envision a better life, then it's just encouraging that and keeping that going. And then as people begin to try new things and follow up with that, they have new experiences, and then the new experiences build confidence.
Right.
And it also actually builds neural connections in the brain. And that helps with neuroplasticity, or helping the brain actually repair, because trauma causes brain damage, literally. It hurts us. And of course, that all depends on the degree of, I just learned something from recent research that our ability to cope with trauma is directly related to how well we can manage our nervous system arousal. So if you can do deep breathing, which is a go anywhere tool, we breathe every day, we got a lot lungs and a nose, if you can just inhale really deeply through your nose and then exhale all the way really slowly, and then pause, like push all the air out and then pause. There's this moment where you don't have any oxygen in your lungs, and there's this moment where your heart rate goes down. And people who are good at that, kind of athletes sometimes have a really good they call it vagal tone. Athletes have a really good vagal tone. That actually lowers nervous system arousal in our entire body. And it's something we can do easily. We don't need to spend any money on it. And if we can keep, training ourselves to do that, then actually our recovery from trauma is much faster.
It's interesting because I know that concept came up a lot when I did use of force training. It was one of the things that we were always teaching people was breathe before you're going into a situation, because we tried to really simulate the situations that we were going to be facing. And so I guess just physiologically, why is it that has such a calming effect before we go into these situations, or when
if you think about the opposite, we could all, and I don't recommend doing this, but we could all generate a panic attack right now by hyperventilating through our mouth, gasping. Because what do we do when we're running from the saber-toothed tiger? We are gasping for breath. We're going, right? So if we started doing that, immediately, I just did that twice, 2 gasps, my heart rate started going. So why? Is because my brain saw my body, or it noticed my body gasping, and it sent off an alarm bell in my brain that you have to mobilize your resources so the heart starts going. So the opposite is then true, right? If you slow your breathing way down, you breathe really deeply through your nose, because if you're breathing through your nose, it's like you're telling your brain, I've got plenty of time to get air. I'm really not desperate right now for air. I don't need to gasp out of this wider hole, in my neck. I can slowly breathe through my nose. So everything's cool. So the brain gets the message, we're cool. We don't really have to work that hard. The heart doesn't have to speed up. And then if you keep going with the gasping and stuff, you can make yourself dizzy. You can flood your body with cortisol, the stress chemical, which then CRT chemicals go through our body, and we get blood clotting mechanisms in our blood. So we're ready to get injured, and, infection, all the tools our body needs to fight infection. That's all in our body. And meanwhile, we're not fighting anybody. We're just worried about giving a speech or asking our boss for a raise or telling our husband we're unhappy with something, or whatever the issue is that's causing us stress, we're having this panic reaction. So and a lot of people hear this over and over again, how breathing can reset your nervous system, but they don't do it.
It's funny you say that, because in the last 2 days, our youngest nicked his knee. So he came in just screaming, right? And it's like, what do you say? Well, you're trying to calm him down and like help him out. Take some deep breaths. And then today I had one of my daycare kids. It's okay. Take some deep breaths. And then I'm like, when was the last time I took deep breaths when I was in a stressful situation, right? It's one thing to say, but to actually implement it. And I think too, for like a lot of us, and even just thinking coming out of this pandemic, even, I think a lot of times people were in this stress and anxiety mode for like, not just minutes, not just after a nick knee, right? It was like days, weeks, years, right?
Yeah.
Where all of a sudden it's like, oh, you're finally taking, a sigh of relief. And okay, like I still have my job, I still have my house, all that kind of stuff. But it's hard too, and you can speak on this, like living almost in that, high stress mode for so long.
Well, and that's the amazing thing about our brain and the way it's designed, is that we are adaptable. We are adapting machines, and really the best predictor of our functioning in life is our ability to adapt. And we're going to have to adapt throughout our whole lifespan, right? We're going to have to adapt to ups and downs of the economy. We're going to have to adapt to differences in our physiological changes that occur as we age. We have to adapt to our children's different ages, our parents aging. We have to adapt to a global pandemic, wars, all different kinds of things humans have to adapt to, and other animals, right? So animals adapt, and those that don't have trouble, right?
Right.
So one of the cool things we learned about this breathing thing is it helps you with your prefrontal cortex cognitive functioning and reasoning. So your reasoning is going to get better. It was really interesting. I had an experience last year around Father's Day weekend. I was on a hike with my family. My husband and I love to hike, and it was Father's Day weekend. We had our kids, and I hike all the time, and it was a really hot day, and I was kind of cocky, and I wore my sneakers instead of my hiking boots. And we're coming down. It's like 90 degrees. It's really hot, and we're coming down the mountain. We're already kind of tired. And I slip into a crevice and break my foot. And I'm like 2 miles up the mountain. And so I try to walk, realize, emergency needs to be called. My husband calls emergency. This really cute guy named Tim comes down from a helicopter on a wire like Tom Cruise. And he says, we're going to go up on this cable, and I'm going to kind of be behind you, sort of like cradling you. And here, I'm going to put this harness on you. And I'm looking at my son-in-law, and I'm like, you better take pictures. I don't know if I can help, And so I just quickly went, wait a minute, you teach coping skills. You
and if anybody,
dramatic breathing through your nose. So I just started your day has changed. You are now doing something different. Let's pay attention to the present moment. This guy, Tim, seems pretty confident, like he can do this safely. So just listen to him very carefully. And so then as we get off, the ground, I'm on, and of course we walk up this mountain to get the view. Well, I've got the best view of the whole town, and I thought I better just enjoy this. I'm hanging there from a cable. This is an adventure, so I changed my idea. If you had asked me, do you want to dangle from a helicopter on a cable? I would have said, are you crazy? But I ended up adapting because I was just telling myself, use your skills. Mm-hmm. So if you know the skills and you tell yourself in the moment to use them, you cope better. And so I'm taking pictures of the guys in the helicopter and we're chatting, and my foot hurt like heck, but I got taken care of. And I was able to cope and not see it as, I mean, obviously if I'd had a life-threatening injury or something, it would have probably been a lot more scary. And I was fortunate that it wasn't anything more serious, but it was a good example of how just knowing the skills and then actually using them, you adapt immediately. Doesn't take years of therapy. You just go, okay, I'm in a new situation. This is what I'm supposed to do now. And you cope better, and the outcome is better. So I think learning the skills is really useful. I used to teach in a local college. I taught psychology classes as an adjunct professor. I know you teach too, Brian. It sounds like you do really interesting work. I would love to interview you guys, but I don't have a podcast. You guys seem so interesting. But anyway, the what was I just saying? I was just talking about teaching. Okay, so I was teaching the class about how you can't see color from peripheral vision. You can only see color when you're looking straight on. So that's why a lot of eyewitness testimony is so messed up, because when a crime happens, you might see something out of the corner of your eye, and then you're looking over here, and then the bad guys are running over there, and you can't tell what race they are. You can't tell what color they are because you weren't looking straight on, and you didn't see this. And so I was teaching this concept. Well, and how to be a good eyewitness was basically part of it too, and also how to calm yourself down in these kinds of situations where crimes occur. Well, the woman worked in a supermarket, and these bad guys came in with guns and shot around, and they were all hit the deck. And she just had my lecture. And so she's just kind of laying there, and she's going, I got to look at these guys head on, and, I'm doing my deep breathing, just play dead, just don't, So she used all the coping skills, and she was able to give a really good description of these guys that robbed the store. And it was basically, she learned coping skills, right? And that's useful for society. I feel badly that happened, but it felt it made her feel like she was coping better with the scariness of the situation because she knew what to do. Mm-hmm. And if you don't know what to do, that's when, panic can really kind of overtake you.
Yeah. No, I agree.
Yeah. So it sounds like, what I pulled out of that was, number 1, breathing, number 2, reframing the situation, and then 3 is some kind of affirmation.
Yeah. I think basically be in the present moment, accept the current situation, and pay attention to the present moment. Because it is our awareness that gives us the most safety. It's our awareness that protects us. Mm-hmm. So, if we are, in a crime situation, having your ears to hear and your eyes to see and your senses. And a lot of times our body will tell us this person isn't safe. Your body will say, stay away from that person. And if you don't listen to that, you get in trouble, right? Because a lot of times our intuition picks up signals that our conscious mind hasn't quite figured out. Why do I think this person is unsafe? And sometimes when you break it down later, you go, oh, well, it was a hot day and they were wearing a huge overcoat and looked like they had heavy things in their jacket. What were those heavy things? That could be something dangerous, but in the moment you just think this person looks weird and I'm not safe, So I think that's where deep breathing helps your cognitive functioning. And then being in the moment, accepting the situation for what it is, you're going to pay better attention. And that's going to help you cope with any situation you find yourself in.
Yeah, being in the moment, I think that's so big. And, again, with this time of the pandemic, and even just in regards to parenting, like there were so many times like that word pivot, I'm over it. I'm so done with it. And I think many other people are, right? But it's like, there's so many times where it's like, okay, kids, oh man, the plans have changed. So and so is showing some signs of COVID, so they can't come. And now we're not having this event, right? And teaching the kids, okay, it's okay. There's a reason why it didn't happen. It's not like it's never going to happen again. It's not like this friend, even let's say, isn't ever going to come to your house. Just not going to happen today, right? We're going to change things up. It's something we can't control and move on. And man, I feel like we didn't have to do that so much. And it was like all of a sudden for these like last 2 years, it's like almost all the time, daily.
Oh yeah.
And I think toward like, not even towards the end, like halfway through, it was just like, okay, this is scheduled, but like also keep in mind, this may not happen. Right. Or for people who like are working, like, yeah, your shift's scheduled, but it, like, I couldn't imagine, keep in mind, you may not get called in, which therefore means you may not get paid, which here's your mortgage going to get done, paid and covered. So it's like all that stuff, right? It's really hard to self-talk when it's out of your control, but then it trickles down and it starts impacting other areas of your life.
Well, and your kids too. I mean, it's so hard. I really feel for young parents. Like my kids are all grown now, and I have 2 grandsons. And I just saw what my son and daughter-in-law went through, which trying to protect their kids.
Right.
Daughter-in-law is a teacher, and teaching hybrid and all, just all the changes. And then, like you said, there's the disappointments that your children are going through and trying to raise them to be adaptable, to be able to say, okay, your life isn't over because, the birthday party got canceled or whatever. But they feel like it is because that's like their biggest thing in their life. And then you have to, as parents, both sympathize, but also try to help them cope. And I think it all gets back down to, from what the research in the neuropsychology says, is that coping really begins with managing our nervous system arousal. So when we're grieving a loss, whether it's the loss of a birthday party or the loss of something bigger, we don't want to accept that that's happened, and we have this sort of fixed idea that I cannot be happy unless this thing happens the way I think it should. And that's a lack of adaptation. We're not resetting to now this is what's happening. And so there's usually a process that's painful to go from, I don't want this to be true, to, oh, it is true, and I have to deal with it, to what can I do now to help myself feel better? And so we can move faster with practice, and adults hopefully we've all probably had lots of practice with disappointment and things not going our way and having to go, oh, well, I'm going to have to, reset. But it's easier to do that if you can calm your own nervous system down. And that's the deep breathing, meditation, exercise, quality relationships, people you can talk to, where you can say, man, this was a rough day, where you get that sense of that oxytocin bonding feeling of we're safe with our people here. We might not be safe out in the world with COVID, but we're safe with our little bubble. So I think that's what can help kids too, is what is the anchor for safety that they have control over? Is there a little happy place? Like for my sons, their happy place, if we were living in the time of COVID when my sons were little, and I have a daughter too, my sons would love the Legos, and they could amuse themselves for hours with Legos. My daughter would be probably the one that had the worst time because she's highly social and is sort of the theater director of her friendship group. So she would have had the hardest time adapting. She's found a way as an adult because she's got the skills now as an adult. But I think each child's personality type is individual, and they are going to each have a different anchor that they can be their little happy place that they have control over. Mm-hmm. So it could be their toy or their soothing thing, or it could be, jumping on the trampoline in the backyard, or, whatever it is that each individual child finds comforting. It's good for parents to encourage that, them to find that thing and or to try that thing. And it does take a while for kids to sometimes figure out what they love to do, but that can help with coping as well. Because especially in uncertain times, like you see these refugee videos of Ukrainians in these bomb shelters, and that the one that made me cry with the little girl singing a song from Frozen, and they were all encouraging coping mechanisms of we're still going to try to have fun, we're still going to try to normalize as much as possible, even though we've been completely uprooted mm-hmm. from our home. And people who can do that quicker, adapt better and cope better and are more likely to have a better recovery.
Mm-hmm. Now, the one thing I'm kind of fascinated by now, just based on what we've been talking about, is your book, because I'm just learning so much listening to you, and mm-hmm. Obviously I know there's a lot more in the book. But can we talk about the book? I'm just going to pop it on the screen here for everybody who's watching, and for those who aren't, Gina's book is Frazzelbrain: Break Free from Anxiety, Anger, and Stress Using Advanced Discoveries in Neuropsychology.
Well, thank you. Yes, I wrote my book for these frazzled times. The key word for the last 2 years is frazzled. I hear that all the time. Still hearing it. We're not over, challenging times. We're still living in them. So I kind of define Frazzelbrain as sort of this mixture of anxiety, anger, and stress, where we're feeling an agitated pressure to do something quickly, but we also feel this sort of fatigue. And then some external stressor happens, like, the get a plumbing leak, or car breaks down, or child gets sick, and the whole apple cart falls over, and we feel like we're beyond our coping mechanisms. So it's also because I'm a therapist, I've been referring lots of my clients to books on anxiety management and anger management. And a lot of times I'll have to read 3 or 4 books to kind of cover what I wanted them to get from the books. And I realized also that some of these books are written where they don't start getting any remedies or ideas about how to make things better until like chapter 7. You're reading through the history of anxiety and what it does and how terrible it is, and here's these checklists. And a lot of my clients would read these books and they would just be like, I am so stressed out just reading the first 3 chapters. I'm not going to finish this book. And so I'm like, okay, sorry, wrong recommendation. But I wanted my book to be have something soothing and very comforting, and that the process of it is a comforting process to read it. And a lot of the feedback I'm getting is some people have even told me that after they read it, they could just look at the book sitting there and it made them feel better, because it sort of made them access some of the tools in the book. So it's divided into 3 parts based on kind of the way neuropsychology is. So it's basically looking at your focused thoughts, because we do need to look at where we're focusing our mind. Because we have a lot of power if we intentionally focus our mind in a healthy direction. And I show people how to do that quite easily. So focused thoughts, intentional behavior. So these are things that you decide you're going to do because they are going to be helpful, and you make a plan to do these behaviors. And then healing experiences, because we talked about how trauma isn't really we're not going to heal and recover from trauma without new experiences. So we have to intentionally seek out new experiences. So healthy relationships would be a new experience. Experiencing awe and wonder, like going to majestic waterfalls and allowing yourself to experience something new and uplifting, a great musical concert or sports performances sometimes can give people this like, wow, I watch the Olympics and there's studies that show that allowing yourself to experience awe and wonder changes your brain chemistry and has healing effects. It encourages hope. It increases our humility, which is really good for relationships to have some humility. So there's a lot of things I talk about in terms of healing experiences and all that sort of thing. So you get some new tools in each chapter, and I have these little things called frazzle hacks, which are really simple little exercises. Again, you don't need years of therapy. You can instantly change your brain chemistry by doing some of these exercises, and they're easy, and they don't cost any money, except the book. Buy the book, please.
Yes.
Now, I also just put your website on the bottom. So frazzelbrain.com. So if you do want to subscribe for updates and learn more from Gina as as time progresses, because obviously there's a lot of knowledge there that we can all benefit from. I guess. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I just wanted to say one more thing. A little tip that's really easy. If you have a performance or something that's a high pressure meeting that you're about to go into, or a performance or athletic event, and you want to perform well and you tend to choke a little bit, maybe you have anxiety about it. I did it right before this interview, before the podcast. So you can get a little tennis ball. I have a little Frazzelbrain here, which is a little stress ball, basically shaped like a brain. I call it a Frazzelbrain. And if you squeeze it in your left hand for 15 seconds, you can use a tennis ball. If you don't have anything, you can just make a fist, like 15 seconds, like that. That they found with studies that it activates the right pleasure centers of the brain, and it produces a mild relaxation effect, and they get measurable improvements in performance from in tests and all kinds of things. It's 15 seconds. It's easy. So that's the little frazzle tip I'll leave you with.
No, I love it. What I'm actually going to do here is plug our own business here. So if you're looking for squishy balls or stress relief balls, check out mymmc.ca. We can take care of you.
Awesome. Yes, go there. Get one now.
I'm gonna go and keep one in the kitchen.
Left hand.
Yes.
Now, before we wrap up, what are some of the things that you're working on, or even just how we can stay connected with you and stay up to date with what you're doing?
Sure. You can find a link, frazzelbrain.com has links to all my social media. And I also blog for Psychology Today. And the name of my blog on Psychology Today is Frazzelbrain. So I've made it very easy. One word. You can find me anywhere. And I'd love to get feedback from people. If you read the book, if you just want to chat based on our talk, I would love to hear from people, and I will get back to you. And please follow me, and we can stay connected.
That's great.
Well, sounds good. Thank you so much for the time. I wish we had another hour. I could definitely I could definitely talk with you for another hour. But again, thanks for taking the time and helping us to disrupt our everyday.
Thank you so much. It's really been a pleasure talking to you both. And like I said, I wish I had a podcast I could invite you on.
Thanks, Dr. Gina.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to the Disrupt the Everyday podcast. For more ways to listen, connect with us on social media. To be a guest or to partner with us, check out our link tree at Disrupt the Everyday. Join us next time for more ways to disrupt the everyday.